In the Eye of the Beholder, a quest through time and sanity. The hills of Torvellen were ancient bones protruding from a dying land. No living soul recalled the vibrant green that once supposedly carpeted their slopes beneath the warmth of twin suns. That was a tale for faded parchments, a whisper from a world long since surrendered. Now they stood stark and barren, meticulously stripped by winds that moaned in tongues no scholar, however learned, had ever succeeded in translating. Stones, bleached to the stark white of skeletal remains, lay strewn across the desolate earth. From a great height, an observer might discern their arrangement into vast, unsettling spirals, as if the planet itself bore the brand of some colossal, watching entity from beyond the veil of stars. The few desperate farmers who still tilled the meager soil at the feet of these hills, those who dared wander too close to the oldest of these stone circles, often returned changed. They would speak of sudden nosebleeds, of dreams that fractured upon waking, leaving behind only shards of terror and incomprehensible geometries. Most, after one such trespass, stopped returning at all. Beyond these grim hills, where the very ground fractured into jagged, weeping seams, lay the forgotten skeletal ruin of Valor's Eye. This city, once a beacon of wisdom, famed across realms for its insightful sages and its uncannily accurate seers, had long ago succumbed to an unknown fate. Its slender, elegant towers had collapsed inward upon themselves, their proud structures reduced to sodden, paper-like remnants dissolving in the relentless, unseen rain of ages. No modern maps charted this blighted place, no decaying road signs offered passage to its shadowed heart. Yet, drawn by whispers or by some internal, unbidden compass, wanderers still found their way to Valor's Eye. One such solitary figure picked his way through the desolation now. He wore a traveler's coat, its original color lost to sun and storm, now a faded, indeterminate hue. It seemed too thin, too frail a garment against the insidious chill of the wind that curled and eddied around the cracked foundation stones of the dead city. His name was Eron Hale, once a respected scholar of Candlekeep, long since exiled for pursuing knowledge the archmages there deemed too perilous, too volatile to touch. A short, neatly trimmed beard shot through with threads of grey framed a jaw set with quiet determination. His fingers perpetually stained the dark, deep blue of scholar's ink, testified to countless hours spent with quill and scroll. His eyes, calm yet intensely alert, held the profound weariness of a man who had witnessed far too much of the multiverse's shadowed corners and had learned the hard wisdom of silence. He carried a worn leather pack, its contents a collection of weathered scrolls, ancient charts, and a single, heavily bound case, secured with multiple leather straps. Periodically, he would pause in his slow, deliberate progress, pressing a hand flat against the cold, trembling earth, listening, measuring, sensing the subtle, disturbing currents that flowed beneath. The air around the ruins of Valor's Eye did not simply carry a chill. It hummed with a palpable tension, an invisible vibration akin to the shimmering distortion above a blacksmith's forge at the peak of its heat. Except, this was no heat. This was something far more fundamental. Reality itself, the very fabric of existence, seemed to grow thin here, stretched taut like an ancient brittle hide. Aaron felt this attenuation with an instinct as sure as a master smith knows the precise moment before heated steel will crack and split under the hammer. The world here flexed, It folded in upon itself in subtle, impossible ways. Its edges twitched, a constant, unnerving tremor as if it yearned to draw a breath but had long forgotten the simple mechanics of how. And deep beneath the rubble of the fallen city, buried within the silent, lightless earth, something waited. Something vast and aware. Aaron had dedicated years, a significant portion of his life, to hunting down whispers, fragmented legends of a thing, an artifact, known only as the eye of the beholder. He did not seek the grotesque, many-eyed creature that terrorized caverns and held dominion over shadowed lairs. Those terrible, floating tyrants with their myriad eyes like sharpened daggers and madness carried upon their breath were but a horrifying echo. This eye was older, far older. It was a name, a concept that the beholder kin had borrowed, adopted, perhaps in an attempt to claim its power, but they did not own it. They worshipped it. Their alien dreams took on its perceived shape. They constructed elaborate, dangerous cults, not around their own monstrous kind, but centered upon the idea of this primal eye, a jewel of impossible facets, some said, or a lens of perfect cosmic clarity. No two accounts entirely agreed on its form, but all concurred on its function. It was reputed to show the true shape of all possible worlds, all potential realities, simultaneously. It was whispered to unravel the very distinction between seeing and becoming. The first concrete mention he had unearthed, after years of sifting through obscure texts and half-forgotten lore, was hidden within a crumbling, psychically imprinted translation of an illithid memory crystal. This artifact had been smuggled out of the oppressive darkness of the Underdark by a half-mad gnome explorer named Felik Twistlock. Felik, poor soul, had died screaming in a locked room days after his return, his mind shattered by the truths or horrors he had witnessed. His small house, inexplicably, had burned itself to the ground 2 days following his demise, though no mundane fire, no visible flame was ever reported by his bewildered neighbors. Aaron, with his prodigious memory and keen eye for esoteric symbols, had painstakingly memorized the crystal's intricate, mind-bending glyphs moments before the magisters of a paranoid conclave had seized it, locking it away in their deepest, most warded vaults. Still, he kept searching. A reclusive druid dwelling deep within the shadowed ancient heart of the Condlewood had whispered to him, his voice like the rustling of dry leaves of a sacred hidden place where the vivid tapestry of dreams bled into the mundane fabric of waking life, where the veil between worlds was thin enough to touch. A shipwrecked elf, her eyes still reflecting the terror of the abyssal depths that had claimed her vessel, once pressed into his hand a sliver of what she fervently claimed was a fragment of the eye's own reflection, a piece of shimmering, obsidian-like glass that wept viscous crimson tears when touched by living flesh. He had bartered half his personal library, a collection of rare and forbidden tomes, for that single enigmatic shard. It had crumbled into inert, common dust a mere week later, leaving him with nothing but more questions and a gnawing sense of urgency. Piece by painstaking piece, Aaron Hale had followed the twisting, elusive trail. His quest had led him across the vast, bewildering expanse of the Great Wheel, through the countless planes of existence. He had navigated the treacherous, ever-shifting alleys of Sigil, the City of Doors, and traversed the clanking, perfectly ordered cog forests of Mecanus. He traced echoes and fragments of the eye's influence across the chaotic, formless tides of limbo, and delved into the dust-choked, silent tombs that littered the war-torn battlefields of Acheron. But the center of this sprawling cosmic web, the point to which all clues invariably, stubbornly pointed, always led him back here, to the desolate, wind-scoured hills of Torvellen, to this ruined city, Valor's Eye, which had, according to the most fragmented and terrifying legends, dared to try and use the eye, and had paid an unimaginable, annihilating price for its hubris. In recent times, the disparate beholder cults, once scattered and secretive, had grown bolder, more organized. They now called themselves the Circle of True Sight, a grandiloquent title for their increasingly dangerous ambitions. They promulgated a new disturbing doctrine, that beholders were not aberrations, not monstrous mistakes in the cosmic design, but were instead interpreters, heralds of a greater, more profound reality. They preached that the multiverse itself, in all its infinite complexity, had been shaped in deliberate mimicry of the primal eye's multifaceted gaze. Each plane of the Great Wheel, they claimed, was merely a different blink, a fleeting aspect of its perception. And when the eye opened fully, truly opened, all barriers between these realities, between all possibilities, would irrevocably collapse. Mortals, they promised, would no longer be confined, trapped within the narrow confines of linear time, nor imprisoned within a single, frail form of flesh and blood. They would see, would experience the full, glorious sweep of their own potential across infinite lives, infinite selves. They would become themselves, all of them. Or, Aaron suspected with a cold dread, none of them. Total integration or total annihilation. The cult now boasted agents far beyond the ranks of their own kind. Not only beholders, but human warlocks drawing power from unsettling patrons, wizards delving into forbidden spheres of magic, and strange, unsettling prophets who spoke with two voices, uttering pronouncements that twisted logic and unsettled the soul. They proclaimed the eye as a god, a perfect mirror, the ultimate, undeniable truth. Aaron himself had witnessed their growing power, their reckless abandon. He had watched, hidden in the shadows of Athkatla, as they tore a shimmering, unnatural rift in the very air above the city. 9 eyes of a high beholder priest had glowed with an unholy light as the tear widened, revealing not the familiar sky but a roiling vista of alien stars that blinked with the slow, deliberate pulse of monstrous pupils. And something from that otherness had looked back. 2 days later, a quarter of Athkatla's oblivious population had awoken speaking Draconic in perfect, unsettling unison. By nightfall, they had forgotten language entirely, their minds wiped clean, reduced to a primal, infantile state. Aaron, chilled to his core, had fled south. The image of that alien gaze burned into his memory. Now, after all the years, all the miles, all the sacrifices, he stood before the final, largest spiral etched into the dust and rubble at what felt like the geometric and metaphysical center of Valor's ruin. He had dreamed of this specific place for months, waking in a cold sweat with the faint, stinging sensation of complex symbols temporarily burned into the skin of his arms, their alien geometry defying his waking mind's attempts to describe or comprehend them. He had heard the eye call his name, not aloud, never with sound. It was a pull, a resonance, a silent summons that vibrated in the deepest structures of his being. With hands that remained surprisingly steady, he unstrapped the small, secure case from his pack. He opened it slowly, revealing its precious, dangerous contents. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay his piece of the eye. It was a lens, perfectly smooth, like a solidified drop of the purest water, yet blacker than any shadow, seeming to drink the very light around it. It did not reflect the grim reality of the ruined city. Instead, its depths showed others, flickering, tantalizing glimpses of different worlds, different times, sometimes dozens overlaying each other in a disorienting, beautiful, terrifying cascade. Aaron had dared to look directly into its depths only twice before. Both times he had lost hours, time slipping away unnoticed, his consciousness ensnared by the visions within. Once, he had seen a version of himself seated upon a throne carved from a single, colossal crystal, with distant stars orbiting his crowned head like captive moons. The other time, a far more poignant vision, he had seen himself as a young child laughing with innocent joy beside a sparkling, sun-dappled river that in his own reality no longer existed if it ever had. He held the lens now, its surface cool and unnervingly smooth against his calloused fingertips. Carefully, reverently, he lowered it to the precise center of the great stone spiral and the world around him. Sighed. It was not a movement of air, not a shift in atmospheric pressure. This was something deeper, something that resonated beneath the very concept of meaning. Reality, in the immediate vicinity of the lens, began to blur, its edges softening, losing their definition. A second Valor impossibly flickered into view, superimposed upon the ruins, this one unmarred, its towers gleaming, its streets filled with people walking in quiet, purposeful peace. Then another Valor emerged. This one drowned beneath a turbulent, dark ocean, its structures encrusted with alien corals. A Valor beneath skies dominated by twin, blood-red suns. A Valor where swarms of beholders drifted like grotesque clouds above a fortress constructed entirely of bone. Aaron's heart stuttered in his chest, a painful, irregular beat. The eye, his fragment, was awake, and it had seen him. It knew he was here. The air before him cracked, a soundless, violent shatter that rippled outwards like a stone dropped into a pool of absolute silence. Behind him, a hole, ragged and unnatural, tore itself open in the sky. This was no controlled portal, no shimmering gateway. It was a wound, bleeding darkness into the world. From its depths slithered something that should not, by any known law of physics or anatomy, have been able to fit through such an aperture. It possessed no visible legs, no wings, no discernible limbs. Its form was a horrifying conglomeration of eyes, too many eyes, too large. Each one rotated independently along a body that seemed to bend and distort light as it moved, making its true shape impossible to ascertain. This was not a beholder, not as any sage understood them. This was something older, something that predated such classifications. Its myriad eyes, each a universe of cold alien intellect, fixed upon Aaron Hale. They did not blink, they did not move from their target, but somehow, with a certainty that bypassed all senses and lodged directly in his mind, he knew what it wanted. The eye, his piece, it belonged to this entity, or perhaps to all of them, the things beyond. They had not lost the eye, he realized with a sudden sickening clarity. They had placed it, a seed, a lure. Aaron stood at the precipice of a choice, a decision that felt heavier than all the planes combined. He knew with a dreadful premonition honed by years of studying forbidden law what would likely happen if he attempted to wield the eye's power directly. He had seen glimpses in fragmented texts and madmen's prophecies of how the far realms, the places from which such entities hailed, could twist and warp reality into an incoherent nightmare of nonsense and raw madness. he had read accounts of logic itself burning like so much dry tinder, of time stuttering and collapsing, of cause and effect weeping in confusion. But he also knew, with an equally compelling certainty, what the eye showed, what it offered, possibilities, all of them, untangled, unfiltered, a torrent of visions sharper and more intense than any he had experienced from the lens before flooded his mind, invited by his moment of indecision. He saw a future where he managed to destroy his fragment of the eye. The world around him, the very fabric of the multiverse, seemed to sigh in collective, temporary relief. But the wound would remain. He saw another future where he embraced the cult's twisted vision, joining their ranks, becoming their chief prophet, leading them in their mad quest to unravel existence. He saw one where he was born not as a human scholar, but as a magnificent ancient dragon, his scales shimmering with arcane power. One where he was never born at all, his thread absent from the great tapestry. He saw one, stark and immediate, where he died right here, right now, his quest ending in failure and oblivion, and yet another, where he lived forever, a timeless, weary observer of an ever-changing, ever-suffering multiverse. He closed his fingers tightly around the smooth, cool lens of the eye, drew one deep, steadying breath, and stepped into the heart of the great stone spiral. The spiral did not lead downward into the earth, it led in, and the eye in his hand, the eye that was part of a greater cosmic perception, opened fully. Aaron Hale no longer possessed a clear sense of whether he stood, floated, or merely existed as a point of disembodied awareness. The eye had drawn him inward, not with the violent suction of a whirlpool, nor the disorienting rush of a fall, but with a profound, gentle folding of things. Time, weight, even memory, the fundamental anchors of his being, no longer functioned here, not in any way he had previously understood. He perceived what might have been his hands, more than one pair it seemed. Some older, gnarled and arthritic, some younger, smoother, unlined, reaching out into a cascade of versions of himself, each self flickering like a multitude of candle flames in a vast, windless, lightless void. He found himself in a place, if such a word still applied, that seemed shaped by pure thought, by raw potential. It was not empty, nor was it full. Everything here existed as a possibility waiting to be born. Every breath he might have taken echoed through thousands upon thousands of lungs that might or might not be his. The eye, his fragment, pulsed in his palm, its substance now colder than before. Not a physical temperature, but the absolute, unyielding cold of pure, unadulterated truth. He had passed into the between. This was not the ethereal plane with its ghostly mists, nor was it the astral with its silver chords and timeless void. This was no plane he had ever read about, no destination on any known cosmic map. This was the hinge upon which all other planes turned, a place outside or perhaps beneath the great wheel where the primal eye's encompassing gaze rested. And from that gaze he felt an awareness. It was watching him back. Aaron had come prepared, or so he had believed. His pack had contained scrolls inscribed with potent sigils, charms of warding, and diagrams of complex protective circles. None of them mattered here. The eye did not respond to spells, to the carefully constructed formulae of magic. It responded to something far more fundamental, to choice. It was a key that opened nothing, revealed nothing, until it sensed the stirrings of genuine intent. He closed his physical eyes, a reflexive action that had little meaning in this place of pure mind, and focused his will, not to cast a spell, but to ask one single, desperate question. What is breaking? The eye answered instantly, not with words, but with a torrent of vivid, overwhelming images that seared themselves directly onto his consciousness. He saw Sigil, the city of doors, that impossible nexus of the multiverse, spinning erratically off its true axis. Its countless portals, gateways to every conceivable reality, flickered and sputtered like dying stars, their connections failing, severing. He witnessed Mechanis, the great clockwork nirvana, the plane of absolute, unwavering order, frozen in a state of terrifying stasis. Its colossal, interconnected gears, which had turned with perfect precision for eons, no longer moved. Modrons, the geometric servitors of pure law, clustered in silent, confused masses at the plane's core, their multifaceted eyes spinning with uncharacteristic agitation, all of them chanting the same dire phrase in an infinity of languages. The pattern phrase, the pattern phrase. He saw the far realm, not as an external threat, not as a distant, encroaching void. He saw it inside, bleeding through infinitesimal seams in the very fabric of the multiverse like insidious ink spreading through wet, fragile cloth. Shapes that were not shapes, that defied geometry and sanity. Thoughts that possessed teeth, that gnawed at the foundations of reality. And then he saw the beholders, more of them now than he could have ever imagined. No longer scattered, solitary tyrants ruling over isolated lairs, but organized, unified, their actions chillingly aligned, led by a new, terrifying purpose. Their cult, the circle of true sight, had evolved beyond mere worship, beyond supplication. They were building now vast, arcane machines, unholy portals, lenses crafted from nightmare glass and solidified sorrow. They were no longer searching for the eye. They were attempting to become it, to forge their collective consciousness into a new, monstrous instrument of cosmic perception. The swirling conceptual landscape of the between blurred once more, the visions receding, replaced by a new, unwelcome solidity. When his perception cleared, Aaron found himself standing upon a vast, flat plain of rusted metallic stone beneath a sky of oppressively pulsing, bruised grey. 100 dark, leaning towers like the rotted teeth of some colossal dead god clawed at the horizon. He knew this desolate, hopeless place. Carcerai, the prison plane. But this was not the carcerai he remembered from aged texts, not the ordered, layered prison of legend. The distinct layers, the 6 descending globes of despair, seemed to have collapsed into one another, creating a single, sprawling expanse of torment. Reality here felt loose. It wobbled precariously around the edges of his perception. A constant, grating pressure hissed within his skull, like the unbearable, sustained vibration of a tuning fork jammed directly into his mind. A voice, cool and resonant, spoke from directly behind him. "You brought it here." He turned slowly, every movement an effort against the oppressive atmosphere of the plane. The woman who stood before him wore robes that seemed woven from pure, living shadows, each fold and drape flickering through a disturbing kaleidoscope of forms, now gleaming like polished armor, now resembling bare, white bone, then shifting to the fluid darkness of ink, then to the rustle of ancient, decaying silk. Her eyes were even more unsettling than before. They held entire galaxies within their depths, each stellar swirl, each nebula cloud spinning with a velocity that defied comprehension and threatened to unravel his sanity. "I did not," Aaron began, but her voice cut through his denial. "You did. Perhaps not in this specific thread of choices, this singular timeline, but in many others. enough to create a confluence. She circled him slowly, her movements fluid and predatory, like a celestial hawk might circle a dying, insignificant hare. Do you finally comprehend what the eye truly is? Aaron swallowed, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. I thought I did. An artifact, a lens. You persist in thinking in terms of mere objects, of artifacts to be wielded or understood through simple mechanics. Her voice was patient, yet held an edge of ancient weariness. The eye is not a thing mortal. It is a seed. A cold dread trickled down Aaron's spine. A seed of what? Her shadowed lips curved into a smile that held no warmth, only a vast cosmic emptiness of will, the primal will that first looked out into the initial formless void and dared to utter, "I wish." Behind them, among the leaning, decaying towers, the very ground groaned. Something immense, something ancient and slow, moved between them, dragging eyes on tendrils so long they seemed capable of looping around the bruised grey sky itself. It did not roar. It did not need to. Its sheer, silent presence was a suffocating weight. The woman held up a hand, a gesture that seemed to hold back the encroaching horror, if only for a moment. Your choices, Aaron Hale, are narrowing with every breath you take. Aaron took an involuntary step back. What are you? Once I was a god, she stated, the words carrying the weight of forgotten eons. Now I am an echo, a remnant. I serve that which watches from beyond all this. But I also serve what was, the memory of a less fractured existence. You stand at a fulcrum. You must choose. The eye in his hand pulsed again, a silent throb against his palm, and with it, a fresh swirl of images, starker, more urgent than before. He saw a future where he shattered his piece of the eye, scattering its potent fragments into the chaotic energies of the border ethereal. The cults fractured, their unity broken. Beholders raged across countless worlds, their plans disrupted. The insidious encroachment of the far realm receded for a time, but the pieces would remain, and they would call. He saw another where he bound the eye, not to an external artifact, but to his own soul, became its living lens. In this future, he saw every version of himself, lived them all in a dizzying, simultaneous existence, died and lived, and died again in infinite agonizing loops until the very concept of choice ceased to hold any meaning. He saw a future where he attempted to hide the eye, to bury it away from all who sought it, but it was always found. Sooner or later, always. There was no future where it stayed buried forever. The eye, he understood with a despairing finality, was now an intrinsic part of the pattern, and the pattern itself was unraveling. The woman stepped closer, her shadowy form seeming to absorb the dim light of Carceri. You still cling to the notion that the eye merely sees possibilities. It does far more. It creates a form of gravity. Every gaze it casts, every potential future you observe through it, adds weight, adds substance to that path. You are not merely watching potential futures, Aaron Hale. You are actively pulling them toward you, toward reality. Aaron's fingers twitched around the eye shard. A wave of guilt, of unintended consequence washed over him. I did not mean to. Perhaps not, she conceded, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. But you did. And now the planes themselves, the very structure of what is, bends and warps around your impending decision. Something cracked overhead with a sound like splintering cosmic ice. A fresh tear, uglier and more violent than the last, ripped open in Carceri's bruised sky. Purple, malevolent fire licked at its edges. The far realm, no longer seeping, now poured through. Viscous, unnameable shapes, disembodied eyes blinking with alien malice, voices that screamed backwards, their meaning a direct assault on sanity. "They are coming," she said, her tone flat, devoid of surprise. "No," Aaron corrected, a new, terrible understanding dawning in his own eyes. "They are already here. They were always here, waiting for the invitation." He raised the eye shard, not in defense, not in supplication, but in sudden, stark comprehension. "I see the thread now, the true thread." He reached into the folds of his worn traveler's coat and pulled out a second object, a shard of dull, seemingly inert glass. The broken piece of the supposed eye's reflection, the one the shipwrecked elf had given him so long ago, the one that had crumbled to dust in his world. But not here, not in this place where possibilities converged. Here, in the liminal space of Carcerai, on the precipice of the between, it had reformed. Whole, shimmering faintly. Two pieces, apparently different, yet part of the same unimaginable whole. The eye, he realized, was not singular. It was not merely an instrument of perception. It was choice, and its twin, this other shard, was consequence. The leaning towers of Carcerai finally gave way, collapsing into mountains of rusted rubble with a sound that was swallowed by the growing roar from the tear in the sky. The things that poured from that wound screamed louder now, their forms becoming more distinct, more terrifying. Aaron pressed the two shards together in his trembling hands. They fit perfectly. The unified eye in his grasp blinked once, a slow, deliberate cosmic pulse of light and shadow. And the world, all of it, changed. Aaron stood on a beach, the cool, damp sand yielding beneath his bare feet. He recognized this place, the silent strand far to the west of Waterdeep, a place of solitude and ancient mysteries. The waves whispered against the shore with the gentle, sibilant voices of old, forgotten friends. The unified eye was gone from his hand, but he could still feel it, a profound, undeniable presence, not on him as an external object, in him. It had embedded itself within his very essence like a second soul. This was not possession, it was not corruption, it was something else, possibility, pure, untethered, integrated. A voice, faint as a distant star, echoed not in his ears, but in the core of his newfound awareness. "You are the lens now. You shape what is seen." He fell to his knees, breath heaving in ragged gasps, the enormity of the transformation, of the burden crashing down upon him. And in the distant darkening sky, the stars, one by one, began to blink, watching, waiting, choosing. The eye ceased its unnatural blink. It had begun to breathe, a silent cosmic inhalation that seemed to draw the very essence of the man into its core. Aaron Hale found his footing, though the ground itself offered no true solidity. Pale, spectral sand shifted beneath his boots, not with the yielding of common earth, but with a slow, rhythmic swell, like the rise and fall of a colossal chest, hidden just beneath the surface. The silent strand, the desolate shore he knew, stretched behind him, its eerie permanence a stark contrast to the new, impossible vista above. This sky was not his own. The stars, those distant cold sentinels, writhed with a manic energy. They did not trace the slow, predictable arcs of celestial mechanics. Instead, they jerked, reeled, vanishing and reappearing as if in a state of constant, frantic reconsideration. The moon, a swollen pearl in the alien dark, pulsed, a soft, luminous beat that thrummed in disturbing synchronicity with the frantic hammering in Aaron's own chest. The alien artifact, the eye, had become part of him, an organ of perception grafted onto his soul, and the fabric of this altered reality now responded to his presence, to its presence like muscle twitches answering a disturbed nerve. He had never intended this fusion, this terrifying symbiosis. But intention, he was beginning to understand, was a luxury that had been stripped from him. The gossamer veil of the between, the interstitial non-place, grew perilously thin. With its decay, the walls separating all things began to dissolve. A sound reached him first, preceding any visual horror. A wet, chitinous scraping, then a sound like sodden parchment folding slowly, deliberately, over something brittle, something like bone. From a fresh, bleeding rent torn violently across the new sky, the tendrils descended. They were long, impossibly so, gleaming with a sickly, mucus light, uncoiling from the darkness above like the questing limbs of some abyssal dream. The far realm was not merely intruding, it bled into this space, a slow, viscous seepage of pure alterity. It did not pour or rush, it flowed, a tide of sentient madness. Thoughts, tangible and malevolent, took on serpentine forms, coiling and uncoiling in the air, their silent passage radiating questions that inflicted a searing psychic pain upon any mind that dared to brush against them. And leading this grotesque procession, its herald and its core, an eye. Devoid of stalk, without teeth, lacking any discernible maw or body, just the eye, a perfect, horrifying reflection, a twin, an answer to the silent call. The beholder cult, those wretched aspirants to oblivion, had achieved their mad design. They had become. Aaron's jaw clenched, teeth grinding with a force that sent shudders down his spine. He dropped to one knee, the impact jarring through him. Each breath was a laborious act, a raw, tearing sensation, as if he dragged a coarse thread through the delicate lining of his lungs. His hands trembled, not from any lingering fear. He had passed through the crucible of terror and emerged into something colder, something harder. This was strain, the pure, unadulterated pressure of a burden too vast for any mortal frame. The eye within him, the one now fused to his very being, offered no words, no guidance. It pushed, relentlessly. Every fleeting second it slammed images against the frail walls of his consciousness, a chaotic library of infinite selves, an endless array of choices already made and unmade, countless beginnings and a myriad of horrifying ends, all shoved into the confines of his mind like too many heavy tomes forced into a satchel far too small to bear them. He could no longer discern his own thread, his own life amidst the screaming tapestry of what was, what could be, what might have been. A scream ripped itself from his throat, a raw, untamed sound of a soul stretched beyond its limits. It tore across the desolate coast, the psychic force of it shattering the nearest towering boulder into a cloud of fine, pale dust. A voice, seemingly woven from the wind itself, answered his cry. "You hold too much." He forced his head to turn, muscles screaming in protest. The woman had returned. The robed figure was gone, replaced by a being of pure, shifting light. Intricate lines of glowing glyphs spiraled and pulsed where her flesh had once been, forming a dazzling, incomprehensible anatomy. Her eyes, if they could still be called such, spun with a dizzying, impossible velocity containing galaxies of terrifying knowledge. "You carry both eye and echo." Her voice resonated, not in his ears, but directly within his mind, each word a cool, smooth stone dropped into a turbulent pool. possibility and consequence. The great weave phrase, mortal because your singular thread now burns with a light too fierce, too bright for the ancient loom to bear. Aaron collapsed forward, his strength utterly abandoning him. The sharp grit of the sand pressed into his cheek, a small, grounding pain in an ocean of unreality. "Tell me," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper, "what to do?" Her answer was as enigmatic as her form. "You already know." A spark, a flicker of understanding, or perhaps mere desperate resolve ignited within him. He pushed himself upward, finding his feet once more upon the breathing sands. Behind him, the fabric of reality tore itself asunder with a final, terrible sigh. Thin strips of pure thought, of conceptual space, unraveled like ancient parchment touched by an all-consuming flame. Shapes, nightmarish and dislocated, emerged from the widening rifts. Modrons, creatures of absolute law, cried out in shrill tones of confused, fractured symmetry, their perfect forms disrupted. Githyanki knights, astral pirates of immense skill, found their silver swords, weapons of focused will, breaking and shattering in their grasp mid-swing. Entire cities, vibrant with millennia of history, winked out of existence, their lights extinguished like so many snuffed candles across the cosmic void. Sigil, the city of doors, that impossible hub of the multiverse, tilted, then fell, tumbling sideways into an abyss of non-being. The prison plane of Carcery, a place of infinite despair, roared with a soundless, soul-shattering fury as its rust-red expanses buckled and cracked. And through it all, the far realm, that sentient ocean of madness, smiled. It possessed no mouth, no features to convey such an expression. Yet the collective intent, the alien amusement was palpable, a chilling wave of cosmic mockery. Aaron raised a trembling hand. Beneath his skin, the assimilated eye pulsed with a soft internal luminescence, light threading through his veins like a network of captured stars. "I choose," he whispered, the words almost lost in the cacophony of a collapsing multiverse. And the between, that tattered, unraveling tapestry, obeyed his nascent will. His mind did not shatter, it split. Not in pain, but in divergence, like a river cleaving into a multitude of desperate paths. He walked 10 roads, 100 roads simultaneously, each step an eternity, each choice a universe. On one path, he saw himself shatter the invading I once more, the original, the twin. This time, its fragments did not scatter into the liminal haze of the border ethereal. Instead, he willed them into the deep, slumbering thoughts of dreaming gods, ancient powers lost in their own cosmic reveries. The eye faded, its immediate threat dissolving, yes, but it transformed, becoming memory. And memory, he knew with a chilling certainty, always returns. On another road, he bound the eye, the one within and the one without, tighter still, weaving its paradoxical nature into the very warp and weft of magic itself, forging it into a new, immutable law of existence. The planes, those diverse realities stabilized, their structures reforming. But a heavy price was paid. Nothing, no being, no power could ever utter a falsehood again, not even to deceive themselves in the quiet solitude of their own hearts. Truth became an absolute, unyielding tyrant. Following a third divergent stream, he simply let it go. He walked into the shimmering, opalescent expanse of the Sea of Morn, a place of forgotten things and lost beginnings, and allowed the deep, silent tide to take the eye from him. In this choice, it sank from sight, descending into the fathomless, silent black. But deeper things, entities older than stars, found it there, all possible futures, all potential outcomes spun out from him like threads from a broken spindle. None were gentle, none offered true peace, none felt final. He screamed again, but this time it was not a sound of fear or pain, but of pure, unadulterated focus, a spear of will hurled into the storm of infinite possibility. And with that focused intent, he willed them all, every branching path, every alternative self, into a profound, echoing silence. One thread, one single solitary path remained. He opened his eyes. The world solidified around him, the dizzying sense of multiplicity receding. The I, the one that had been a tormenting presence, a source of unwanted visions pressed into his skull, was gone. Not removed, not excised. Resolved. It no longer pushed its terrible clarity upon him. It rested now, coiled at the very base of his thought, a potent weapon, a tool of immense power, waiting to be used. But, he sensed, not by him. Not anymore. He turned his gaze to the horizon. The leaning, rust-colored towers of Carcerai no longer canted at impossible angles. The sky, once a canvas of screaming chaos, no longer wept or tore. In their place, something perhaps more terrifying settled upon the landscape. Stillness. An absolute, unnerving stillness. Too perfect. Too complete. He saw the cultists then, those who remained of the beholder's worshippers. Dozens, perhaps hundreds, were scattered across the strand. They were not fighting, not chanting, not engaged in any of their mad rituals. They were kneeling, heads bowed low, their myriad eye stalks usually writhing with malevolent vigilance, hung limp, defeated. They had witnessed his transformation, his choice, his act of will, and they knew. Aaron offered no words. He walked past them, each step upon the pale sand as quiet, as deliberate as a forgotten prayer whispered in a ruined temple. He reached the breach, the final gaping wound in the pattern of reality. The raw, untamed energy of the far realm pulsed just beyond it, a lurid, disorienting kaleidoscope of impossible colors and geometries. One alien eye from within that chaos met his, then two, then a multitude, too many to count, swiveling, focusing, all part of a single composite consciousness. The cult's god, made terrifyingly real by their fanatical devotion and the thinning of the plains. "You hold the seed." Its voice was not sound, but a wave of pure thought that washed over Aaron's mind, cold and ancient. "But you are not its soil." "No," Aaron agreed, his own thought a quiet echo. He held up his hand. His eye, reappeared. Not as a shard of alien glass or a physical object. It manifested as pure, concentrated light, a miniature sun cupped in his palm. He offered it forward, towards the waiting god. The manifold god from beyond the tear reached with a tendril of pure thought, of grasping intent. And Aaron closed his hand. The light of the eye winked, not shut, inward. The ensuing event was not an explosion of sound or force. It was wide, an expansion of pure concept, a wave of choice, of consequence, rippling backward through the currents of time, washing over the immediate past. Aaron watched, a detached observer, as the eye, his eye, undid itself, not erased, but completed, its purpose fulfilled, its paradox resolved. The strained threads of reality tightened, snapping back into alignment. The great loom of the cosmos, which had been fraying under unbearable stress, stopped its destructive unraveling. The stars above, once madly careening, slowed their dance, settling into their ancient, majestic procession. The breath of the plains, that subtle, vital rhythm of the multiverse, settled, finding its harmonious cadence once more. He felt his strength leave him then, a sudden, complete emptiness, and he fell, a marionette with its strings finally cut. He awoke in the dim, dappled light of the forest near his childhood home. The wind rustled the leaves above with a gentle, familiar sigh. Birds chirped their intricate, unconcerned melodies. There were no signs of cosmic tears, no remnants of gibbering cults, no oppressive weight of watching gods. But when he lifted his hand, flexing his fingers, a faint pearlescent light still flickered just beneath his skin, a subtle internal luminescence. He had stopped the unraveling, had pushed back the tide of madness. But the eye wasn't truly gone. It never was. The final lines of the pattern he understood with a sudden profound clarity were not inscribed in arcane ink or carved into ancient stone. They were walked, every step a stitch, mending the tears, every choice a thread, reweaving the design. And Aaron Hale walked on, through the quiet woods and into the unknown world beyond, no longer just a man, but a lens. A focal point through which the plains themselves might find salvation, or if his will ever faltered, split once more into chaos and ruin.